Hey, it's time for another episode of What's Going On in Sea Lover and How Things Work. This time we're going to cover the quarterberth electronics. So we've got this access panel here in the very back of the quarterberth, and inside of it we have our Xantrex, whatever the heck it is, Freedom XC Pro Marine Inverter. Right, that thing, 3,000 watts. We only got cable for 2,000. It was replacing a 2,000 watt inverter, and that one was wired correctly. It has a number 10 AWG AC coming in, but in order to do the 30 amps, you got to do number 6, I believe. Maybe it's number 8. Anyway, so I have to rewire the AC. The DC is good. I got 2-aught cable coming in, so it's big and fat, and can deliver all the amps it needs to the inverter. But you just can't get the AC out. So someday I'll get around to that, but it's certainly serving the purpose. But also I wanted to show down here, there's this little black box behind those 2 white cables with the blue tie wrap. The little black box, that is the shunt for the Marine energy management system. So that's on the negative lead going to the battery bank. That's up behind this panel. I don't think you can see it right there, but that's the corner, that blue thing in there. That's the corner of the new Relion, whatever, LifePo battery we just installed. So that's access from out in the cockpit. But anyway, this is what's going on back here. This thing's got a remote panel up on the nav station, so you really don't normally have to come back here for anything. I'm still trying to figure out how to do a software upgrade. I've got a USB stick stuck in there. It's supposed to read it, but unfortunately it says I've got to disconnect all the power, including the DC, and there's really no way of doing that. It's hardwired into the number 1 battery, so yeah, it might be a problem, but I'll see what I can do. Anyway, that pretty much covers it back here. It's a little bit of storage too. The wires are running up underneath here. The DC, the AC, the controls for the Xantrex and all that stuff. Actually, the controls, the remote cable runs back here. Now we'll talk about this thing. Let me put the access back to quiet it down a little bit, because that's the fan and the inverter charger running. It's an inverter charger, so it does 100 amps of charging. It can do 150 again if it had the fatter AC cable. Then we could do the 150, but it's not rigged for that at present. Let me see if I can drop this down. There we go. Okay, go into wide angle mode here. Let me light stuff up a little better with the flashlight. Here we go. So this is all the charging components except for the alternator. So we've got 3 Victron MPPT controllers. We've got 2 30 amps, one here and one here. This one is for the Davit solar panels. All of the solar panel and wind generator connections come back on this little protected terminal strip. Okay, so it's got it's a 3-phase wind generator, so it's got 3 legs coming in AC, which then go to this controller. This is the controller for the wind generator. It's got 2 battery hookups for bank 1 and bank 2, so they remain independent and get independently charged, which is an awesome thing. And this is where you can actually turn the charger thing on and off. But there's also a remote panel for this on the nav station, so you can do pretty much everything from there. So a couple of things about the controllers. Okay, so this one's 150. This is for the solar panels on the cockpit. Okay, the cockpit panels are 200 watts each, so they can do 400. These little 30s can only output about 280, 290 watts. All right, the ones I have here for the Davits are already maxed out. The Davit panels are rated at 155, so that's 310, and so they're a little bit oversubscribed, but that's fine because they never see the max anyway. I say never. I've had the controller dump out 290 watts on a good day, so it's basically well tuned for those 2 panels, and everything's working fine. This guy here is really just for the the panel I have on the rail, and of course if I add another one on the other rail, it'll all go in here too, because I've got enough extra load for that. So it's basically only doing 100 watts of the 300 it can do right now. And what else can I tell you? So, interesting thing though is I'm using the load terminals on these controllers. There's one pair here, and then the other pair is on this one, to control two of the DC systems. The first one is from the Davit controller, runs to this inverter. So the input's coming out of the load terminals here. It runs down, there's a fuse here, comes off and hits this fuse before it goes into the inverter. Inverter's got a power switch on it. Be careful, you can accidentally turn it off, and that isn't good. Don't ask me how I know. But all this inverter does is power all this stuff. This is the security stuff. It's got a 8-port switch here. It's got a actual server here for recording the video. It's got a camera connection, and it has two Wi-Fi routers. Are actually, self-contained routers. This one is a 2.4 gigahertz, and this one is a 5 gigahertz. This used to be the main connectivity here on Sea Lever. I wasn't pointing over here. So yeah, here's the server thing, and here's the switch thing. But so these are basically, they're shut off now. They're actually run power over Ethernet. So these two orange cables connect to these two boxes, and that's actually where they get power from this switch. This switch is a PoE switch. So right now it's supplying power to both the server and to the camera on these two cables here. And so all the power is coming into this box from this little inverter. Powers this little brick, powers this switch. So the cool part is this is coming from that load terminal on this MPPT controller, and that means I can go into the controller and turn that power for this up and down remotely. So if I want to shut this off and save some power, I can do it from the cockpit or from up in the V-berth, wherever I want. I've got the remote control application on my phone, so it's basically doable from anywhere. Now on this one, the load terminals, I just got this figured out. So this used to power the inverter for our Starlink Gen 2, which is sitting right here. I just took it down and installed the Mini, but the new Mini requires more than 12 volts. I put it in originally and hooked it straight up to the load terminals, and it didn't like that at all. And I finally did the research on it, and apparently the power cable that they supply does not have a large enough conductor to supply the current it needs at 12 volts. Interesting. But so what Starlink did was provide you a little transformer that takes the AC power of the wall and kicks it up to 30 volts, and it runs the 30 volts over the wire. So what I did to alleviate that was I bought this little silver box here. I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a little silver box right there, and that's a 12 to 24 volt converter. And so that's what I put in line. So the input to that comes here from these load terminals on this controller. And so now this powers the Starlink, and I can also remotely control this and turn the power up and down from the app. I'll kick in a little bit later to show you the app. But so that's basically the whole thing here. So like I say, I haven't abandoned these. They're still hooked up. And now that Starlink's got it's going through some teething pains and trying to rearrange plans, and not in a good way. So that's these may come back into use. They kind of fell out of favor. I mean, we used those cruising around the Caribbean because for the first few years, I mean, everybody had Wi-Fi, and then nobody had security on it, so you could just basically pull up, to a bar or whatever, or marina, and just snag the signal, right? So these guys here have their own little antennas on one port, and then these two cables go back to a pair of antennas that's back on the davits that are directional. So they get a whole lot more signal, but you have to point the antenna at wherever the signal's coming from. And so they've worked really well in the past, but now pretty much everybody's putting security on their Wi-Fi, and so you just can't steal it anymore, right? So it made them kind of redundant. So I've turned them off here. Again, all I got to do is is use a little app to turn the power up and down on the ports here, and it will then fire these guys up and they're back into the system. And they're controlled here, but this lead here goes back to, actually both of these do, but this is the normal connection for all this stuff. And this is the backup link. When I want to use these, I can use them through this blue connection, and that's a different port on the main router. And so, you know, I got a lot of control of it here. I'm a freaking network engineer, retired one anyway, so I know how this all stuff works, right? And you might not, but hopefully, you know, I'll leave enough to where you can figure that out. Last but not least, we got this little blue box here, which is the Servo, which is a basically remote control unit for the Victron. So when you want to talk to it offline, you know, from anywhere in the world, then you can contact it through this box. Now, the bad news is all you can do is monitor and see what's going on. You really can't make any system changes that would help you out. Like, I can't turn off these load ports remotely from the internet using this. Now, what I have done is when we leave, I put a tablet up on the workstation or on the nav station that is Bluetooth, so that way I can remotely connect into the tablet via TeamViewer, the app I use for that. And it's free. If you're just using it for your own personal use, it's free. And so then remotely I can connect to the tablet via TeamViewer and then use its Bluetooth to talk back here and talk to all the stuff and be able to control it all from anywhere. So that's the cool part. So again, I think that covers all the stuff back here. This little terminal panel here, again, this is all the DC power stuff here on this bottom one, and then this is just a ground block that, you know, can assemble all the grounds to. There's 2 circuit breakers, and they're for the 2 different battery banks. So I've got leads to both battery banks coming in. This one's going back to breaker number 1, I believe, or battery number 1, which are the ones that are out here in the nav or in the lazarette, and then this one up here should be going to bank 2, which is the ones underneath the quarter berth here where I'm laying. So they're pretty well protected. I haven't got caps on these guys. I probably should do that, but you know, I've got this cover to cover the joints. It's hooked up by duct tape, but that's worked well for the years. Got a duct tape hinge here going into the access port sidewall. And that's the whole thing. So it's just wired up. You know, most of the connections come here. And this is the remote control connection for the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, for the wind generator that goes to the nav station. These are the power over Ethernet adapters. So they take the power from the switch and then convert it over into the Ethernet cable to then fire up these guys. This is the link that goes to the Starlink. This is the cable here coming from the actual Starlink device, and this is the one that goes to the router behind the nav station. It's just a convenient junction point here for testing and stuff. For a while I actually ran it into the switch and had a separate switch leg for it, but that ended up being counterproductive because then in order to power, you know, if I powered the security system off, then it turned the Starlink off, and I didn't like that. So that's why I went and did this independent thing with the load terminals, so I could turn them on and off independently. It became real important underway, especially with the old Gen 2, because it sucked a lot of power. So we had to keep an eye on it and only use it when we needed it and stuff like that. So it was good having all that control. But anyway, that's about it here. So I wish you could ask questions, but maybe next time. Talk to you later. Bye.